A high-performing team of navies is required for a successful aircraft carrier landing. The art of landing on what can only be characterized as a challenge in comparison to most runways is something that pilots all around the world are highly educated in. The majority of other aircraft can be destroyed by the impact. One of the most challenging tasks as a Navy pilot will ever have to complete is landing on the flight deck. Take for example the latest in a series of aviation mishaps to plague the aircraft carrier Carl Vinson's air wing during its current West Pacific deployment. An F-35C Joint Strike Fighter jet's landing incident on the aircraft's carrier injured 7 sailors very recently this year. But before we dive in, welcome to High Technology. In this video, we are going to look more closely at these emergency landings. Feel free to join the club as we unravel high-end technologies on the planet by subscribing to this channel and hitting the notification bell so you won't miss any exciting videos in the future. When things don't go as planned, landing aboard an aircraft carrier becomes much more risky. In this instance, a test pilot by the name of Captain George Duncan was flying an F9F5 Panther when the aircraft veered off course and the fighter struck the edge of the flight deck, breaking in half. You could assume that the pilot's troubles were over at that point, but it's not what you may expect. The pilot was saved and the fire was swiftly put out because of the rapid action of the flight deck crew. Captain Duncan was able to resume flying after 6 months, and he ultimately became a lawyer. Pilots now apply full throttle at touchdown while landing on an aircraft carriers in accordance with conventional operating procedures. They come to a complete stop if one of 3 or 4 arresting wires is caught. Otherwise, the full throttle offers enough force to proceed down the inclined flight deck and regain flight, typically termed as bolter. The bolter aircraft will attempt to land once more on the next path. However, this wasn't always practicable in the early days of aircraft carriers because they had the present angled flight deck and instead had conventional laptop layout. This meant that there was very little room for error because flights were landing directly in front of the other parked planes. Each plane needs a tailhook, which is exactly what it sounds like, an extended hook attached to the plane's tail to land on the flight deck. One of 4 arresting wires, which are strong cables made of high tensile steel wire, is where the pilot hopes to catch the tailhook. The resting wires are extended across the deck and joined to hydraulic cylinders below deck at both ends. The arresting wire can stop a 54,000-pound aircraft moving at 150 miles per hour in only 2 seconds in a 315-foot landing area if the tailhook hooks in a resting wire. The arresting wire pulls the wire out and the hydraulic cylinder absorbs the force to bring the plane to a stop. To increase the pilot's target area, there are 4 parallel arresting wires placed 50 feet apart. Pilots never fire for the first wire because it is so dangerously close to the edge of the deck. Instead, they aim for the 3rd wire since it is the safest and most effective target. They risk easily colliding with the ship's stern if they approach the first wire too low. Snagging the 2nd or 4th wire is okay, but in order to advance in the ranks, a pilot must be able to routinely catch the 3rd wire. The pilot must approach the deck at just the proper angle to pull off this amazing stunt. Through radio communication and the network of lights on the deck, the landing signals officers assist in directing the aircraft into the landing zone. Instead of slowing down to bring the plane to a stop, as soon as it touches the deck, the pilot will immediately turn the engines to full power. It may sound contradictory, but the jet must be flying quickly enough to take off again and come around for another pass if the tailhook misses any arresting wires. It's referred to as a bolter. In order to prevent bolters like this from taking off from the opposite end of the deck and colliding with the planes there, the landing runway is tilted at a 14-degree angle to the rest of the ship. 2 mechanisms, the barrier and the barricade, were employed in addition to tech cables to prevent landing aircraft from crashing into parked aircraft further forward on the flight deck before the angled flight deck was invented. A 3 to 4 foot high net known as the barrier would trap the landing gear off the aircraft if the tailhook failed to secure a wire. The barrier may be swiftly lowered to allow aircraft to taxi over it in the event that the aircraft caught a wire upon touchdown. The area from which an aircraft carrier's aircraft take off and land is known as the flight deck, a little offshore airfield in essence. The USS Birmingham, an American scout cruiser, served as a launch site for the first airplane to ever leave a ship in November 1910. 2 months later, a plane successfully landed on a temporary flight deck set up aboard the USS Pennsylvania, an armored cruiser. In 1916, flying off decks were built on a few British ships. On August 2, 1917, Squadron Captain Edwin Harris Dunning tested a SOP with pop on the flying off platform of HMS Furious and became the first person to successfully land an airplane on a moving ship. However, during his third effort to land, a tire burst, sending the plane over the cliff and killing him. The unfortunate distinction of being the first person to die in an aircraft carrier landing catastrophe belongs to Dunning as a result. By 1918, the HMS Argus, a passenger ship that the Royal Navy had rebuilt, had a wooden flight deck that had spanned from bow to stern and could be used for aircraft takeoff and landing. The Argus was the first real through-deck aircraft carrier in history, and it served as a template for all those carriers that came after it. During the Cold War era, various developments were made on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. The inclined flight deck created by Dennis Campbell of the Royal Navy was one noteworthy design feature that substantially simplified aircraft recovery and deck movements and allowed landing and launching tasks to be carried out simultaneously rather than sequentially. It also handled the faster landing speeds of jet-powered aircraft well. Early landing techniques required a staff of deckhands to simply grab the slow-moving aircraft of the time, which was a rather unsafe setup. These measures, however, proved unworkable as heavier aircraft with quicker landing speeds emerged. As a result, the combination of arrestor wires and tailhooks quickly became commonplace. The barricade served as the final safety net. The barricade is often packed and only rigged when necessary. The barricade, which resembles a long tennis net, is intended to capture an aircraft that is rolling at above 100 miles per hour. It is extended across the flight deck between stanchions that are elevated from the flight deck to rig a roadblock. Upper and lower horizontal loading straps are linked at the ends to form the webbing. Each upper load strap and lower load strap are joined by 5 vertical engagement straps that are 20 feet apart. After being hoisted to a height of around 20 feet, the barrier webbing engages the landing aircraft's wings, where energy is transferred from the webbing through the purchase cable to the arresting engine. Due to the extremely fail-safe nature of tailhooks, barricade encounters are uncommon. Nevertheless, flight deck crews need to train frequently to be ready to take off as soon as they receive a signal. Despite the fact that ground-based arresting equipment is commonly referred to as barriers, they are no longer in use. On-board carriers, barricades are still in use, although they are only rigged and deployed in an emergency. Fun fact, the C-130 Hercules wins the prize for being the heaviest and largest aircraft to land aboard an aircraft carrier. Lieutenant James Flatney III served as the pilot during the 1963 test, which was carried out by the US Navy. One of the most adaptable military aircraft, the Hercules, was a massive 4-engine C-130 turboprop that could take off and land on uneven runways. It performed 29 touch-and-go landings without stopping, gradually increasing the load weight during the test. Prior to these tests, he had never flown a 4-engine aircraft. He was able to successfully land and take off from the aircraft carrier without the need for the emergency barricade after only a brief amount of training. Even such barricade arrests are uncommon. They occasionally happen. All American aircraft carriers are outfitted with these as a result. Even while these landings are difficult for the pilots and frequently result in significant damage to the aircraft, they are nevertheless more preferable than the alternatives. Barricades are a crucial component of the carrier's toolkit because they have saved many lives throughout the years. Even though you hope you'll never need it, you'll be happy to have it when the time comes. Let's hear what you think in the comment section down below. What else do you think could be the hardest part of emergency landing on aircraft carriers? That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can always get to watch more incredible videos like this. This has been High Technology, serving you the best and cutting-edge contents on the highest form of technology available on the planet. Until then, see you!